My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. I wake up every morning at 6, pack lunches, iron dress shirts, and make sure everybody in that house has what they need before I ever think about myself. That has been my life for 9 years. 9 years of being the first one up and the last one to bed. 9 years of making sure the Hargrove family name stayed polished and clean while I quietly did every single thing that kept their world running. I never complained. I never asked for more than what I was given. I just kept my head down and kept going. And for 9 years, I actually believed that was enough. I thought loyalty meant something in that family. I thought the work I put in, the sacrifices I made, the pieces of myself I quietly gave away would count for something. I was wrong. I found out exactly how wrong I was on Christmas Eve, in front of everyone, right there at the holiday dinner table with the good china and the candles lit and Bing Crosby playing softly in the background. My mother-in-law, Patricia Hargrove, set down her wine glass, looked directly at me across that table, and said it like she was reading off a grocery list. She said, "I think it is finally time we discard you, Sarah. You are no longer needed here." The table went dead quiet. My husband, Daniel, did not move. His brother kept his eyes on his plate. His sister suddenly became very interested in her napkin. Nobody said a single word, not one person. Just the sound of the fireplace, crackling, and Bing Crosby humming and the whole room holding its breath. And I just sat there. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not flip the table or throw my wine glass or do any of the things I maybe should have done. I just sat there and looked at her, this woman who had smiled at me at my wedding, who had handed me recipes and called me daughter and let me believe I belonged. I looked at her and I felt something shift inside me. Not break, not shatter. Shift, like something that had been leaning against a wall for a very long time finally decided to stand up straight. I excused myself from the table. I walked upstairs to the bedroom that I had decorated myself, with curtains I had picked out and photos I had framed, and a whole life I had carefully built, and I opened the closet. I did not slam it. I did not throw things. I just pulled out my suitcase, the big one I had not touched in 3 years, and I started placing things inside it. My things. Only my things. My documents were in a folder I had kept in the back of the nightstand for reasons I could never quite explain at the time. My social security card, my passport, a few account papers of my name on them, and a small envelope of cash I had been quietly setting aside for just over 2 years because some part of me, some quiet, careful part deep down, always knew this day was coming. I did not say goodbye to anyone. I zipped the suitcase, put on my coat, walked down the stairs past the dining room where they had already resumed talking, and I walked out the front door. The cold air hit my face and I just kept walking. I called a cab from the end of the driveway. I sat on my suitcase in the dark and I waited. And while I waited, I thought about every holiday dinner I had cooked in that kitchen, every birthday I had organized, every time Patricia had handed me a task and smiled like she was doing me a favor, every time Daniel had looked at me like I should be grateful just to be there. I thought about all of it, and then the cab came, and I got in, and I told him to take me to the train station. I did not know exactly where I was going yet. I just knew I had to get far enough away that when the next chapter of my life started, none of them would be in the frame. At the station, I sat on a bench with my suitcase and I watched trains come and go, and I tried to figure out what 9 years of my life actually added up to. And that is when I heard a voice next to me say, "Hey, you okay?" I looked up, and I had no idea yet that this stranger was about to change absolutely everything. He was maybe 40, 42, well-dressed but not in a showy way. Dark coat, no tie. The kind of calm that comes from a person who actually has somewhere solid to stand in life. He was sitting one bench over, and he was looking at me with the kind of concern that felt real, not nosy, not creepy, just genuinely human in a way I had not experienced in a very long time. I told him I was fine. He nodded like he did not quite believe me, but was not going to push it. He looked back at the board and said, "I always think train stations are the most honest places in the world. Nobody is here pretending to be somewhere they are not." I did not know what to say to that, so I did not say anything. But I did not move either. He introduced himself as Marcus. He said he was in Cincinnati wrapping up some business and heading back home to Chicago. He asked where I was headed, and I told him honestly that I had not decided yet. He did not react to that like it was strange. He just nodded again and said, "Sometimes that is actually the right answer." We sat in silence for a minute, and then I do not know why. Maybe because he was a stranger and I would never see him again. Or maybe because 9 years of staying quiet will eventually split a person open, I started talking. I told him about the dinner. I told him about Patricia and the wine glass and the dead quiet table, and the way Daniel just sat there like a man watching something happen on television that had nothing to do with him. I did not cry while I told it, I just laid it out like facts. Marcus listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer me a solution or tell me what I should have said or done. He just listened. And when I finished, he was quiet for a moment and then he said, 9 years. And tonight was the first time she said it out loud. I looked at him. He said, but it was not the first time she meant it. And something about the way he said it made my chest tight because he was right. I had felt it for years. I had felt it in the way Patricia rearranged things I had organized. The way she spoke to Daniel about family decisions like I was not in the room. The way she introduced me at events, sometimes as Daniel's wife and sometimes just as a friend of the family, like my title in that house, was never fully settled. I had felt it and I had buried it under loyalty and hard work, and the belief that if I just kept giving enough eventually, I would belong. Marcus looked at his phone and then he did something I was not expecting. He stood up, walked a few steps away, and made a call. I was not trying to listen, but the station was quiet and his voice carried. He said, "Mom, I found her. Yes, I am sure." He came back and sat down, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he said, "My mother runs a women's transitional support program in Chicago. It is not a shelter. It is not charity. It is a resource center for professional women who are rebuilding. Legal support, housing assistance, career counseling. She has been running it for 11 years. I stared at him. He said, "I told her I was sitting next to a woman who just walked out of 9 years carrying nothing but a suitcase and her dignity, and she said, 'Get her on the train.' I did not know what to do with that. I had spent 9 years in a house where I had to earn every inch of ground, and here was a man I had known for 20 minutes handing me something with no strings attached. I asked him why. He said, "Because my mother walked out of a situation like yours when I was 7 years old with nothing and someone helped her. That is the whole reason." I took a breath. I looked at my suitcase. I thought about the folder in my bag with my documents and my passport and that small envelope of cash. I thought about Patricia setting down her wine glass with the same ease she would use to remove something from a countertop that had been in the way. I thought about Daniel's silence. And I made a decision right there on that bench in the Cincinnati train station at 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve. I bought a ticket to Chicago, but what I did not know yet, what nobody at that dinner table knew yet, was that the life I was quietly walking toward had a direct connection to the life they thought they had just thrown away. And when that connection came to light, absolutely nothing would ever be the same again. The train pulled into Chicago Union Station at 6 in the morning on Christmas Day. Marcus had texted his mother from the train, and by the time we walked through those doors, there was a woman standing near the main entrance holding a coffee cup and looking like exactly the kind of person who had seen enough of life to never be rattled by any of it. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Webb. She was 61 years old, silver hair pulled back clean, wearing a long wool coat and the kind of steady eyes that make you feel like whatever you are carrying, you can set it down now. She hugged me like she knew me, just pulled me in and held on for a second and said, "Welcome, you are right on time." She took me to a furnished apartment the program kept for new arrivals. Clean, warm, simple. A bed, a kitchen, a window that looked out over a quiet street with snow still coming down soft. I sat on that bed, and for the first time since I walked out of that dining room, I let myself actually feel the weight of what had just happened. 9 years. Gone. In one sentence. But I was still here, I was still standing, and something in me was already starting to move forward before my mind had even fully caught up. Over the next 3 weeks, Dr. Webb connected me with a family law attorney named Christine Park. I sat across from Christine in her office and I laid everything out. 9 years of marriage, a house that I had maintained, improved, and functionally managed entirely on my own. A joint account I had contributed to consistently from freelance design work I had been doing quietly on the side for 4 years. Work that Patricia never knew about and Daniel had never paid much attention to. Christine looked at my documents, looked at my account records, looked at the photos I had taken over the years of the work I had put into that property, and she said, "Sarah, you have a very strong case. I did not want revenge." I want to be clear about that. I did not lay awake at night dreaming about Patricia's face falling apart or Daniel scrambling. That was never the goal. The goal was simply what was mine, what I had earned, what 9 years of loyalty and labor and silence had actually built. Christine filed the paperwork in mid-January. Daniel called me 4 days later. His voice was different. The easy confidence was gone, and what was left underneath it was smaller than I expected. He said he did not understand why I was doing this. I told him very calmly that I was doing it because I had earned it and because his mother had looked me in the eye at Christmas dinner and told me I was disposable and not a single person at that table, including him, had said one word. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She did not mean it like that." And I said, "Daniel, she meant it exactly like that, and so did your silence." I hung up. Patricia called 2 days after that. I did not answer. She left a voicemail that was 11 minutes long. I sent it directly to Christine. 3 weeks later, the settlement negotiation began, and that is when the full picture finally came out in the open. Because Christine had done her research, and what she found was that the house Daniel and I lived in, the house I had spent 9 years maintaining and improving, had been quietly transferred into Patricia's name 14 months ago without my knowledge. Daniel had signed off on it. Christine looked at me across her desk and said, "This was not impulsive. This was planned." And there it was. The Christmas dinner was not the beginning of anything. It was the end of a plan that had already been in motion for over a year. They had been preparing to push me out long before Patricia ever set down that wine glass. The case expanded. Christine brought in a forensic accountant. The transfers, the timing, the paperwork, all told a story that no one in the Hargrove family wanted, told out loud in a courtroom. 3 months after I walked out of that house with one suitcase, Daniel agreed to a settlement that gave me enough to start completely clean. A real start, not survival money, building money. I used part of it to officially launch the design business I had been running on the side. Within 8 months, I had 6 steady clients in a studio apartment in Lincoln Park with my name on the lease and nobody else's. Dr. Webb invited me to speak at her program's annual event that fall. I stood up in front of 60 women and I told them the truth. I told them that dignity is not something anyone can take from you. They can take your seat at the table. They can take the house, the title, the years, but they cannot take what you know about yourself when you are standing alone at a train station on Christmas Eve with nothing but a suitcase and the quiet decision that you are not done yet. Patricia never apologized. Daniel moved on. And I discovered something I had somehow forgotten during 9 years of making myself small enough to fit inside someone else's idea of who I should be. I remembered who I actually was, and that, it turned out, was more than enough.